Okay, hello everybody. Got a few more coming in from the waiting room. So I want to say hello and welcome to the My Jewish Learning Siyyum for Tractate Kiddushin. We have completed our study, or by the end of this hour, we will have completed our study of the final tractate in Seder Nashim, the order of the Talmud, dealing with women. And it is really lovely to see you all. Since the last time we came together as a big group, things in the world have been very, very difficult. And especially the Jewish community, I think, is feeling it. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we come together in that space. This Sunday is going to be Shloshim for those who were killed on October 7th. And many of us are thinking about that date coming up. And I just wanted to say that it is strengthening to me to be together with all of you today and to be learning Talmud. It feels very affirming. So thank you for being here. And thank you also to our panelists, our sturdy panelists who come to join us today to discuss and celebrate this milestone in our learning. So we are joined today by Rabbanit Dasi Fruchter. Can you give us a wave there?
Hi, Mazel Tov, everybody.
Rabbanit Fruchter is the spiritual leader of the South Philadelphia Shibboleth and the teacher of a popular Daf Yomi class. We also have Rabbi Elliot Goldberg.
Hi, everybody. Mazel Tov.
Rabbi Goldberg is an executive coach and consultant with more than 2 decades of experience in Jewish day schools and a lifetime of summers at Ramah camps. And finally, we're joined by Rabbi Asher Lopatin.
Hey, everybody. Yesher Koch and Mazel Tov.
Rabbi Lopatin is the rabbi and founder of Kehilat Eitz Chaim in Detroit and the executive director of the JCRC-AJC in Detroit. And we're delighted that you're here as well. So in a few moments, I'm going to ask you to share. You can start now. Go ahead and share where you are zooming in from today, where in the world you are. And we always like to hear your reflections on these tractates. What are you taking away? What stuck with you? What is inspiring you? What is troubling you? Do you have questions for this panel? And we will try to address as many of the comments as we can in this hour. But I'd like to get us started with a moment of chazara, of review, because we are coming to the end of the whole order of the Talmud that deals with Nashim, with women. And as a reminder, we started so many months ago with Yevamot, this tractate that dealt specifically with levirate marriage, the marriage that happens when a man dies childless and his widow then marries his brother to produce an offspring in his name. Very specific kind of scenario, not very common. Then we moved on to Ketubot, marriage contracts. We had a little detour from the subject of women into Nedarim and Nazir, vowing in its various incarnations. Back into women with Tractate Sota, again, felt more specific, the situation where a man suspects his wife of adultery. And we closed out with 2 tractates, Gitin, which has to do with divorce documents, and Kiddushin, which we are here today to celebrate, which has to do with betrothal. And you may be wondering, as I sort of was, as we got to the end of all of this, thinking that something was missing from all of this. There was a tractate that I was kind of expecting to have, that I think many of us might have expected to have, that isn't here. And that is the tractate on actual marriage, like the marriage ceremony itself. We talked about writing marriage contracts, Ketubot. We talked about writing divorce contracts, Gitin. We talked about betrothal, the commitment that precedes the marriage, but we didn't actually discuss marriage, the ceremony of marriage, all that much. So before we get underway, I thought I would just kick this out to our panelists for comment. Like, why do you think, what does the Talmud say about marriage? There are small comments that are scattered throughout. And what do you make of the fact that there isn't a whole tractate devoted to it?
Well, I will jump in here. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I was thinking about this. You only gave us a few minutes to think about it, but I was thinking about this, and you know what? We put a lot of money into the actual marriage and the ceremony, but I think you have to think about when you're a life partner, when you're going into it, and you're becoming basar echad, like the Torah said, al ken yazov ish et aviv ve'et imo. The Torah says you leave the nest, you leave your parents' home, or you're the home, you create your own family. It shouldn't just be about that ceremony where people invest thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and think about those maybe more external parts that are beautiful. I've done many weddings, they're beautiful. But I think maybe there is this emphasis of think about your values, think about your family values, your tradition, who you are as a person when you meet up with someone, and who you're going to spend God willing, your whole life with. So I think maybe that's why there is this emphasis on everything else, but it mentions a little bit, but really the actual ceremony and the marriage ceremony. So I think that's something to really think about, and hopefully that it just shows that the religion, Judaism, is the tradition, is all behind that. I'll just say one other quick thing, and that is, I heard that in Europe, the couple would actually see the Rav, a Rebbe, really a very educated person who would make sure that everything was right, the yichus was right, maybe that they were a good pair, and then anyone could do the wedding. You didn't need you could have a schlepper, you can have anyone do the wedding, but the main thing was making sure that this is a couple that really takes everything into account. So maybe that's one of the reasons why the actual wedding itself is sort of given short shrift in Seder Nashim.
Rabbi Goldberg, any thoughts? So it's okay if not. I did.
Yeah. As I was
started.
thinking about your question, what came to mind is, in some ways, this is true of other places as well. In the Talmud, we spend a lot of time talking about what kind of oil you can use for your Shabbat candles, but not what you're supposed to do, at Shabbat dinner. We know about the bracha. There's some brachas you have to say, but there's like Shabbat dinner, which is an important, I think maybe the candle lighting ritual is a transitional one. It takes, 15 seconds, maybe 30, depending if you say what you do as a family. Shabbat dinner is like the whole evening. That's a huge part of Shabbat dinner. There's not a lot about that in the Talmud either, but there's a focus on certain pieces. So I wonder if in a legal discussion of laws, there's more emphasis here on the prenuptial agreement, which is like the betrothal, who's fit to marry whom, all the rules, but once it's all set, and then you're going to have a feast to celebrate, we don't need to legislate that the same way. Maybe we know joy. And so there's a way in which I hear what you're saying, that it's odd, but in some ways, I think there are other, as I think back to other parts of the Talmud, some things that might be the most meaningful, we don't have the legislation for, because the joy just comes, and rules aren't. It's not about the rules at the wedding celebration. It's about the celebrating, and we have plenty of stories there about the rabbi who poured wine for one rabbi, not the other, and what goes, the interpersonal stuff about how you made me angry at my son's wedding and blah blah blah. I love those stories because it gives you insight that the rabbis are human, but separate from that, we're left alone to figure out, go dance, celebrate. You know how to do it.
I like that interpretation. And Rabbi Fruchter, I'm going to give you a chance to respond, and we'll let you then transition right into what you had prepared to share with us today.
Great. Thank you. That really resonates with me, the idea that joy, Rabbi Goldberg, and also grief in some ways need less legislating in the minutia, right, of both of those things. And I think what I want to share today is a reflection on what the legalistic stuff is doing here, And I'm going to think about that for a long time, because sometimes when I meet with couples before their weddings, they have this like imagining that a Jewish wedding comprises of 4 million things that take 3 hours. And I'm like, actually, we could do that part in 6 minutes. Right. The actual ritual, legalistic parts are very, very short, but to build around it, the life transition you need is going to be a different story. I also just want to name that for me, as an Orthodox woman and a leader of a community as an Orthodox woman, this is my first time completing Seder Nashim, and teaching it, obviously, but I'm feeling all the feelings of having within me the words of our sages, the challenges, and grateful to the crew that I learn with regularly to help parse out some of these difficult issues. So let's go back to this question. What are the legalistic pieces of this? Why do they comprise 3 whole tractates with like several pages in between of theology, hashkafa, right? An approach to how we understand God and the world. So what is this all doing here? And I think that there's a real lesson here about what it means to build a relationship grounded in Kiddushin, in what's called in Hebrew holiness, right? Or set apartness. That's the title of our tractate, Kiddushin. It's set apart. And in some ways, it almost seems like from the beginning of our tractate, we're talking about a transaction. I know Rabbi Goldberg's going to talk more about that later on, but like, here's $10. Can I have a woman, please? Right? Like, is that what's happening? No, it's not exactly what's happening. If you look through the tractate, there are differences between, a regular transaction and what's going on here. And the first part of our discussion says that a woman is acquired, right, in 3 different ways, right? So this word niknate, right, a woman is acquired. What is this talking about? Well, acquisition, and this is the connection I want to make. On Friday night, we quote a verse from Genesis in our prayers. And it's the part of prayers that goes, Magen avod b'tvaro mechaye metim b'mamarot. That part, if that melody sounds a little familiar. And we say, God is koneh shamayim va'aretz. God is the what? God purchases heaven and earth? No, God is the creator of heaven and earth, right? The possessor of heaven and earth. So there we have the same word. Now, what happens if we bring that word into this context again? A man creates this relationship with a woman. What is going on here? What does this mean? It doesn't mean an interaction of just an exchange of goods, but there's actually something incredibly covenantal going on as we are embarking into the wedding ceremony. It's koneh. It's an acquisition that is grounded in something more than just an exchange of cash. And I'm going to do something stretchy because I think this is not what the simple meaning of the Gemara is. When on Daf 49, we learn about the idea of someone who planned to move to Israel and sold off their assets. Do you remember this story? There was some, probably not, because it was already 16 months ago. But they planned to move to Israel. They sold off their assets. And ultimately, what happens? They decide it's not time. We can't go for whatever reason. But even though the person intended to sell based on their plans to emigrate, since they didn't explicitly say this, the sale is final, right? Devarim shebalev einam devarim. Stuff that's just thought-oriented or in your mind are not real, right? Like they have to be actualized in some way. So here's what I want to propose. Kiddushin, the legalistic aspects of it are really tricky sometimes to deal with, especially wearing my 2023 lenses in the realm of greater egalitarianism in a partnership. But, I think a message that kind of finds its way through the tractate is love is not it. Feelings you have for a person is not the end of it. We actually have to introduce a ketubah, economic value, so we can incentivize a lack of abuse. We have to talk about a right and guidelines around sexual engagement and what you must disclose and what you must not disclose. And so when I think about dvarim shebalev einam dvarim, that things in your heart are not really things, legal things, I think there's a louder message there too, that yes, this can be a transformational relationship. It can be, but it has to be also grounded in transaction. And that's a difficult thing. I don't know exactly where to go with it. And you can think about the pie, right? How much of it is transaction? How much of it is transformation? But as we think about relationships between people, and this is the part that I think really can hit home right now and is relevant to what we are going through as a people. As we think about people, what percentage of the way we're talking about them and thinking about them is about transaction? And what percentage is about covenant and transformation? And every relationship needs to have both. I want to conclude by saying that all over social media in the last few weeks, the most popular videos are the videos of weddings. I don't know, like really popular videos of, whether it's chayalim and chayalot getting married or just someone getting married because they have to move it up or whatever it is. There's something so evocative about this life-affirming moment of coming together in a sense of love. And I want to remind us about the source of the words of the Sheva Brachot when we say, the sound of may we hear in the towns of Yehuda and the streets of Jerusalem, kol sason v'kol simcha, right? May we hear the sound of joy and gladness. That's quoted actually in the book of Isaiah in like a terrible vision of destruction. Like that's the source of it. And so suddenly when we're singing at weddings, it's like kol sason v'kol simcha. So many of the times it's like there's a 8-piece band over there and like $4 million flowers and everyone's dressed so beautifully. But the vision in Isaiah is very different. It's a desolate, difficult place. Jeremiah, sorry, thank you. A really desolate place, and then suddenly there's this burst of life, and I think that there's something so important about the way that we're learning about relationships here, even with all of its issues. That's it.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Fruchter. Thank you. Chat, I'm watching the chat. I'm not seeing a lot of questions for our panelists, although I did want to highlight this comment from Neri Tischler, who is anticipating the end of our Siyyum, right? The daf often ends on a sort of high point, and she writes, the ending of this tractate reflects how important the study of Talmud has been for me during these challenging times. It, meaning the study of Torah, serves a person in the time of his youth and provides him with a future and hope in the time of his old age. The end of the tractate really does speak to the way that Torah can be very grounding through an entire life. And just in the course of this particular Daf Yomi cycle, I'm sure everybody in this call has had ups and downs in their personal lives, but we've certainly experienced them in our sort of collective culture for sure. And many of you have talked about to me personally or written to us and talked about how grounding Torah study has been as we have weathered these things. It seems like a distant past, but you may recall that we began just a few months before the worldwide pandemic really came to the fore. And now things have shifted quite a lot. But Torah study as grounding is where this tractate will end, and we will have a chance to reflect on those words more at the end of this hour. But now I'm going to just say once more, encourage you to please share your comments and thoughts on the content if you have them. And I am going to pass the virtual microphone now to Rabbi Lopatin.
Hey, thanks so much. And I have to say that Masechet Kiddushin, I maybe like all Masechet, or maybe even more than others, the rabbis tell it like it is. They tell it like it is and let the chips fall where they may. And I wanted to talk, but And if you've heard me in any of these Siyyum, that it's sort of like these are the primitive building blocks of our religion, but we have to build on them. We're doing renovations in our house, and we really see that actually. We're adding a room in the front, so you have the foundation, and then the floor, and then the cover to the floor. So you really do see like the crude parts of things that underlie what hopefully will be a beautiful room, God willing. Not quite done yet, and our Torah is not done yet. I don't think our learning Masechet Kiddushin, even though we learned it, we have to continue to interpret it through the generations, and maybe our children or our students or our friends will have different interpretations than we have, and it'll continue. So we're continuing to build a beautiful palace from some very crude foundations. So on 75b and 76, Ein Hamid Bet and Ein Vav, it's an interesting discussion of the Kutim, of the Samaritans, and are they Gerei Arayot Hain, or are they Gerei Emet Hem? Are they good converts or bad converts? Gerei Arayot they converted because the lions were going to eat them up when the Assyrian king brought them into the Holy Land, and they said, well, in order to avoid this plague, these lions eating us, we gotta show loyalty to the God of this land, who happens to be Yud-K Vav-K, the Tetragrammaton, whoever. So so some opinions. We have Shlosh Machlokot. Rabbi Yishmael says Savar Kutim Gerei Arayot Hain. So Rabbi Yishmael says that they are just they're just not Jewish. It's not a good conversion. But then you have a different opinion. Rabbi Akiva says Savar Gerei Emet Hain, that they are totally good converts. And I think that when you study, if you've seen in Ezra and Nehemiah, when the later books of the Bible, when it's very sad when the Samaritans, these same folks, want to come and help us build our Beit HaMikdash, to build the second temple, and the Jews who have returned from Babylon reject this. They say, no, we will build. We are the real Jews. You, Samaritans, are not the real Jews. We're not going to build it with you. And I think that's one of the great mistakes. Who am I to disagree with Ezra and Nehemiah? But it's really one of the great mistakes, I think, that they were rejected, and that we couldn't find a way of bringing them together. And I think that it's so great to see the rabbis really struggling with this. And Rabbi Akiva, who is a zealot, right? He's the Bar Kochba's Rebbe, and yet the great fighter against the Romans, he says Gerei Emet Hem. And maybe because he felt that Rabbi Akiva was involved in this great war against Rome, that he had to bring people together. And he had to say, these Samaritans, they're true converts, they're Gerei Emet. But then Masechet Kiddushin again builds this beautiful palace even more, and has a great, I think, an insight for our times. And it is that Amar Rav Idi Bar Avin, Rabbi Eliezer, Idi Bar Avin says, Rabbi Eliezer, that says from a Braita, Matzat Kuti Muteret, V'adam Yotzei V'yedei Chovato B'Pesach. I love this, that the matzah that a Samaritan makes can be eaten on Passover. You can trust the Samaritans. There's a discussion then later on, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that, you know what, I don't know if I like the Samaritans, I might not like them, but whatever they're strict about, they're stricter than the Jews are. And I think that that's a beautiful insight for today. A lot of times, there might be someone might not keep kashrut in the same way as you keep kosher, or might not keep something. But the idea is to really have an open mind and say, you know what, we might think very differently, but I can trust them for this thing. Moshe Feinstein had a question of if someone is a Baal Tshuva, someone becomes from, religious, and their parents are not religious at all, but their parents say, we're going to keep a kosher home. Can you trust them? And Ramosha Feinstein says you can trust that you can eat in their home, because if they are, they saying it, you can trust that they really will do their best. And we know a lot of people that really, they might even believe in God or whatever it is, but if there's something that they're committed to, they will keep strictly. And it's a great way of showing great tolerance and openness, that if someone tells me, well, yes, I followed this and I got everything kosher from this place, that the idea is that, like matzah of Kutim, I'm not saying they're Kutim, Samaritans, but the idea really is try to build these bridges, try to find the beauty in people, even if you disagree with the way they observe or the way they believe. I think Reb Shimon Gamliel really is trying to say, you know what? These are good people, and these are people that you can really trust. So I think that on this surface of a kind of, again, this crude surface of so many of our rabbis rejecting the Samaritans and Nehemiah saying, get out of here, we're going to build the temple, not you. We eventually come to the point of saying, you know what, we're going to have a lot of disagreements, but when someone assures us that they're doing something for our sake, like a matzah of the Kutim, that's a way to go and trust and build that bridge. And I hope we, in our times when we really are looking for Jewish unity, it's a real way of both assuring those that are asking questions and listening to people that are giving the answers that they're really believing from their heart.
Thank you so much. And yes, as Friedel points out, there are Samaritans and there are also Karaites, different groups still living in Israel today. That is true. I can't speak very much to the exact relationship between these peoples and the state and other people in the state. But if someone knows, please feel free to share in the chat.
Rachel, Karaites, actually, they're also the community in San Francisco. Karaites are much later, and there was a fascinating tshuva, a response given because the Nazis wanted to kill Karaite communities, just like Jewish communities. And the answer given by, I forgot which great rabbi was, he saved their lives by saying, oh, Karaites, they're not Jewish at all. But really, Karaites were Jews. Just later on, they didn't accept some of the rabbinic tradition later on, the big discussion, the medieval period, but they're really Jews. And they even have bar mitzvahs, apparently. So, but yeah, Samaritans are not a very small community and not really accepted as Jews now. But Rachel, I'll say one other thing. There was a sort of an anti-Israel rally, when I going to get political, in Chicago, and I saw that there was a group of Black Hebrews who don't always get along with Israel or with Jews because they think they're the real Jews, who were fighting against the pro-Palestinian people, because I think the Black Hebrews say Israel doesn't belong to the Jews and it doesn't belong to the Palestinians, it belongs to us, the Black Hebrews. So you never know who your allies are, so maybe the Samaritans will once again become great allies of the Jewish people.
Okay, we'll continue the discussion in the comments. I wanted to bring a few more of the comments to the fore now, and I think I have 3 here to share. I think all of them are dealing with a similar struggle, which is that egalitarianism, equality in some form, we don't agree exactly what that should look like, but that is a value to us in the contemporary world, and it doesn't feel like it's a value in the same way to the rabbis as it does to us. So, for instance, Susan says, my feeling about all of this is that in a more egalitarian time, this order would have been called relationships and included the voices of actual women. And Martin shared a comment about, you may have remembered, not that long ago in this daf, we were dealing with lineage and issues of when a priest marries somebody who is not fit and creates their offspring is called a halal or halala, like somebody who is not for the priesthood. And this just, the comment here is, why should this child be stigmatized, right? Why do we even have this? It just doesn't feel fair. In the same way that maybe some people have this reaction to a mamzer, right? A mamzer is a child born of a forbidden sexual relationship, and then the child attached to that child who is completely innocent in his own creation. And Donna says, I found it odd that the section on divorce precedes the section on marriage. And I also found it strange that the laws of slavery were mentioned alongside marriage, right? There's a lot of parallel between slavery and marriage, in the sense that both a slave and a wife are under the domain of a man. So, yes, all of this is true. All of this is true, that that the Talmud doesn't encapsulate all of the modern values of egalitarianism that we might hope that it would as a sacred text. My take on this is usually to say that we also don't necessarily have the right answers, right? Our modern ethical values are a product of our time and place, just as the Talmuds are a product of its time and place. And the value in the Talmud is seeing the ways that the rabbis try to earnestly struggle and think through these questions and move things forward, and that as a model for us to do the same. And one thing that I did think was interesting on this very last daf, and I wrote about it a little bit this morning, is you can see some struggle when the rabbis are talking about different professions, right? The daf begins with all these professions that you're not supposed to be a part of. And then they say, well, and this idea that, you know, if somebody is in this profession, they're of lower status, that it's embarrassing, that it's unfortunate, that you shouldn't educate your child to be in that profession. And then there's this moment of like, wait a minute, this is not the way it should be, right? This is not a good way. We need these professions, but also isn't it unfortunate that some people have to be in these professions? And they both basically chalk up this really what they define as a real problem in the structure of the world to human sin. They basically chalk it up to human sin and lament that humans aren't like the animals who all do not struggle for a livelihood and are not differentiated in their careers and have different levels of status in their careers. But I wanted to give our panelists a chance if they wanted to respond to the feelings that this tractate raises for those of us who have perhaps what I will describe as more modern egalitarian values. Even though we don't all agree on what those should be. I also like to name that. We don't always agree about what it means, what modern egalitarian or values of equality are, right? We don't have the answer. We don't even agree on what that answer is. But we can sort of agree that this also doesn't look quite right to us. Did I say it all?
I would just say, I think it's important, Judaism as an evolving tradition over time, it's important to know the different stages, meaning if we have questions about how do we reframe marriage in Jewish tradition? What should that look like? I don't think we should start with a clean slate with a whiteboard and say, let's go into a room and make it up from scratch. Let's see where we've come from. And right, if you're egalitarian inclined, the rabbinic model you notice is not, but that leads to questions like, is there a way, which is what my wife and I did. We took a traditional ketubah text and rewrote it to reflect, the egalitarian nature of our financial agreement in our marriage, and it hangs on our wall the same way as art. We don't refer to it in disputes, but it's there. But it was important to us to do that way. There are others who think instead of transforming, maybe marriage shouldn't be placed in contemporary Jewish marriage shouldn't be placed in this segment of Jewish law, that argue for, let's look at other structures. What does brit, what does covenant look like? And if that's a Jewish idea, what if contemporary Jewish law about marriage went to follow, what we understand about covenants, as opposed to what we understand about the laws we just studied over these months? And I think the conversation is richer when we do it from a place of knowledge and a place of continuity, even when sometimes reading some of the prakim or individual chapters of some of the individual discussions are hard because the rabbis say things that bring out negative emotions because of the way we disagree with them.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Rav Elliott. And yeah, I think we're constantly trying to interpret things, an interpretive, evolving tradition, and we have to put in our passions for egalitarianism and for what we think is right, and squeeze that into the law. And so it really applies to how we deal with divorce, how we deal. I think with the levirate marriage, we've come a long way, at least in Ashkenazi circles, where it really isn't the practice that the woman has to marry her widow's, her dead husband's brother, but rather, we do chalitza. And yeah, I think that it's reasonable to challenge Kiddushin, and it is reasonable to say that this might be, as if I do a wedding, am I putting a couple in danger if they can't get out of it? Both the men and the women. I know cases of men and women who struggle to get out of their marriages, and it's the religious area that they have trouble with to get out of that. And so, prenuptial agreements, all sorts of things. But I think I'm glad we're wrestling with it. It's meant to be wrestled with. And I think that's even why this tractate has so much progressive stuff and then so much maybe more primitive stuff. It's for us to wrestle with it and find out, a new direction using the tradition.
Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and move forward now with our third presentation from Rabbi Goldberg. And then we will conclude this tractate.
Right. I'm going to pick up on something that Rabbi Fruchter said as part of her presentation, that I like the way she said it. Things have to be actualized, right? Transitions, transactions have to have some symbolic, it's not just about some moment in the world where they come to be, not just mentally. Which is a theme in this chapter about the nature of, moving from being single to being married, or being, the way the Masechet frames it, from being in your father's house to moving to your husband's house. It's also a through line about transactions and how we actualize them that are going to lead us into Seder Nizikim, which is coming next. And it struck me that, looking at a piece of the Gemara that foreshadows where we're headed, which is in some ways the same Gemara, but a whole different world. But mostly I picked what I picked because in this moment, I'm going to echo what Rachel said at the beginning too, like studying Talmud brings me joy, and it's a nice space to go to in these difficult times. And I asked myself, like, what do I enjoy most about studying Talmud? And sometimes I ask myself then, what do I enjoy about life? Like, I enjoy kids a lot, being an educator and background. And so I like it when the rabbis remind me of a fourth grade classroom in their deliberation. And that gives me joy. And I happen to love elephants. And that led me to this sugya. So I bring this. I also knew that my colleagues on the panel would give you some lofty, I mean that in a good way, some overarching conclusions that tie together all the Masechtot. And I said, here's a moment in this Masechet that just made me smile. That does have a point to get to, but comes from all those places, and it's the text that spoke to my soul, this week as I was searching for what I would teach. So it's a Kaf Hey Amud Bet 25b. We see a Mishnah that says, a large domesticated animal is acquired by passing, and a small domesticated animal is acquired by lifting. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Eliezer, right? How do we know when you're buying and selling animals when the sale takes place? And by the way, I'm not buying and selling domestic animals, but I've been thinking about this. Like, when do those groceries really become mine in the grocery store? Like, is it when I give them my credit card? Is it when they give me the receipt? I know it's so fast, I usually walk out, it's not a problem. But in our day, even we think about that, like, first I thought, well, once I pay for them, they're mine. But now that we've shifted to online, I don't know if this happened to you. I bought things from Amazon. I think they're mine. And then they cancel the sale because whatever they sold me isn't in stock somewhere. So like it undoes the whole sale. Like what the Talmud talks about is not necessarily so foreign to our everyday lives in some of the civil laws we're going to be looking at. But anyways, for animals, these two opinions say if the animal's large, you just have to pass the reins, right? If you're holding the reins and you sell the animal, once the buyer holds the reins of the animal, that's when they take possession. That's like the handshake or the signature that seals the deal. And if it's a small animal, you lift it up. That's what Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Eliezer said. And the rabbis say, well, a small domesticated animal can be acquired by pulling. You don't have to pick it up. You take the reins and you just pull it along a little bit with some force. That makes the transfer happen. Great. Straightforward Mishnah. Love it. But the Gemara, the rabbis of the Gemara, notice it deals with some categories more fully than others. And we have this teaching that it comes, it says, Rav taught a large domesticated animal is acquired by pulling. So Rav takes what the Mishnah says is for small animals and applies it to big animals, not just holding the reins, but you actually have to pull it. And Shmuel says, wait a minute, didn't Rav say, how could Rav say that? Didn't we learn in the Mishnah was done by passing? And they have some back and forth about is pulling enough? But we get out of this conversation when I think this is where I get to the fourth grade classroom. Another Rabbi Shimon says, forget about pulling or passing, like you acquire an animal by lifting. All animals, large and small, right? So you have to lift. And in the Mishnah talked about just small animals were lifting. But now we've moved to acquire an elephant, you have to lift it, which, I don't know about you. I don't really want to pick up a goat, but I can't pick up an elephant. And that's where then the rabbis use they channel their creative fourth grade brains and start with some interesting things, right? What do we do with the elephant piece if we can't lift it? How do we really transfer an elephant, which I might pull the elephant, but that force won't get it to budge anywhere. I can't lift it. So if the reins piece for the elephant doesn't work, what are my options? So someone says, well, what can you do with an elephant? There's some ideas. One is you could put each foot of an elephant into a different piece of pottery and sell the pottery. So I'm going to buy your elephant, and along with it, I'm going to get 4 pieces of pottery, and I'm going to sell you the pottery too. And when you acquire the pottery, since the elephant is in the pottery, now the elephant is yours, and you don't have to push it or pull it or anything. Well, the image of them trying to get the elephant to stand still and put its feet in the pottery brings joy to me as I picture that scene also. Someone else comes and says, well, maybe we can't do anything with this elephant, but I can rent you the land. When I sell you the elephant, I'm also going to rent you the land on which the elephant is standing. Let's do it that way. Because if you start rent, you become the tenant of the land where the elephant is standing, and you get with that the movable property on that land of which the elephant is movable, even though this debate is sort of because the elephant isn't movable. Maybe by renting you the land, I could transfer you the elephant, and then you don't have to push or pull or lift it. There's other explanations like that in terms of also like maybe we can lift the elephant by using bundles of vines. I'm immediately drawn to Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies. For those who my dad and I watched those when I was a kid. I imagine there's some people who watch those. Lots of swinging on vines and building with vines. And the rabbis in the Talmud said, well, if you need to lift the elephant, maybe you can rig up all your vines and lift them up. What I love about this passage is, well, first it deals with the real legal issue. When does a transaction happen? Which we know is a question in our Masechet and our Seder about when does marriage happen? When does it start? When does it end? Those moments are important. As we move into Nizikin, which is going to talk about all kinds of different transactions, right? We're moving to civil law, much less religious law, things that Jewish laws that aren't operative so much. There's some ethical pieces that will be, but we're moving to a piece where it's really theoretical for us, because the living Jewish principle for us today is follow the local laws of the land that you live. So some of what we're going to becomes theoretical, but the way the rabbis think of them are unique and helpful, and sometimes they give you a new take on that. But what I love about moments like this passage that I brought is sometimes the way in which they get creative about the scenario they go to is just about that joy of learning, where that, I picture that I have a fourth grade student in mind that I picture who raises his hand and says, wait, but what if it's an elephant? What do we do then? And then the kids join in and say, you can rent the land, you could put it in pottery, you can use rope. And then that's where what can sometimes be painstaking legal logic that you have to move through turns into this is fun. And sometimes the painstaking legal logic is fun too on the puzzle side. But there's a joy for me of the pages like this, and many of the Post-its that have flagged my favorite passages of the past 3 years are about, elephants standing in pottery and things like that. So as we finish not just Masechet Kiddushin, but all of Seder Nashim, I wanted to leave us with a passage that made me smile, and at least some of you that I see on my screen. I think there are 250 people on the call today, so I only see 30 of you, but I see some of you are joining me with those smiles, and it warms my heart at a time when my heart needs some warming. So thanks for letting me share, and if you want to buy an elephant, make sure to have some pottery. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us that one thing I also love about the Talmud is they can be super serious and super silly at the same time, right? And they're reminding us that a serious religious, legal endeavor, which the Talmud absolutely is, need not be devoid of joy or flat out humor. And this is not the only example, but it is a fun one. You're getting some elephant emojis in the chat there, Rabbi Goldberg. I don't know if you can see them. So thank you for buoying us with some joy, which we could all use at any time, but maybe especially now. And we are going to go ahead and conclude this Siyyum by burying ourselves in the last few lines of the Tractate. And Rabbi Goldberg, are you up for reading the last few lines for us? And then I will also have you do the Kaddish after Rabbi Lopatin does the Hadron. Will that work for you? Are you able to pull it up?
Just have to unmute. Yeah, I have it. Have it right here. Happy to do that. Okay. The Mishnah taught, Rabbi Narai says, I set aside all trades and I teach my son only Torah. And it is taught in the Tosefta that Rabbi Narai said, I set aside all trades in the world and I teach my son only Torah. As all other trades serve one only in the days of his youth, but Torah in the days of his old age. Behold, he is left to lie in hunger. But Torah is not like this. A person at the time of his, it serves a person in the time of his youth and provides him with future and hope of, it serves him in the time of his youth and provides him with future and hope in the time of his old age. With regard to the time of his youth, what does it say about a Torah scholar? From Isaiah, but they that wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. And for with regard to people in their old age, what does it say about Torah? As from the Psalms, they shall bring forth fruit in old age, and they shall be full of sap and richness. A statement from Rabbi Norai about how Torah sustains us more than our professions and for all of our days.
Thank you so much. And lucky are those of us who are able to make Torah a significant part of our professions, for sure. But happily, all of us can make it part of our daily life. So that's a lovely sentiment. Rabbi Lopatin, would you do the Hadron for us? And Ben Harris, my stalwart colleague in the background, we're ready for that to come up on the screen.
Okay, yeah. And by the way, that last quote in the Masechet is from the song for Shabbat. So if you're in Shul this Shabbat, or if you're in Philadelphia at the Shtibel, you'll be at Rabbanit Fruchter's Shtibel, you'll be saying that and singing that. Yes, so this is not just the end of the Masechet, it's also the end of the Seder Nashim. Hadran alach masechet kiddushin v'seder nashim v'hadrach alan. We will return, you'll return to us, we'll return to you. Daitan alach masechet kiddushin v'seder nashim v'daitach alan. Yeah, we're thinking of you, and you're going to think of us. Lo nashim minach masechet kiddushin. We're not going to forget some of the exciting times we had in masechet kiddushin and seder nashim. Veloti nashim minam. And don't forget us. Don't forget our struggles and our ideas. Lo ma'al mahadem, lo ma'al da'ati. Not in this world, not in the next world. May it be your will, O God. Here we go. That Torah will be integrated into everything we do. So it's going to be part of our craft. And in this world and in the next world. Chanina bar Papa, these are all people that apparently gave their lives for Torah. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Chai bar Papa, Abamar bar Papa, Refram bar Papa, Rachish bar Papa, Surcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Dara bar Papa. And now, my favorite part. Harev na Adonai Eloheinu et yirei Toratcha b'finu fiyo damcha b'yitzro. God, make Torah pleasant in our mouths and in the mouths of every Jew. And Beit Yisrael, everyone included. Let us all learn Torah. Teach me your mitzvot, and I can conquer my enemies. We are so grateful that you allowed us to come to the Beit Midrash. Thank you to my Jewish learning that you allowed us to come to the Beit Midrash. And you didn't make us among the people that, are drinking or whatever. Not that drinking's so bad, but learning Torah, much better. Everyone wakes up early. We wake up early to learn Torah. And other folks, I don't know what they wake up for. But you know what? When you learn Torah, you get reward somewhere. And a lot of other things we do in this world, I used to watch a lot of TV, no reward. Everyone in this world is running and is busy. But if we use Torah properly, we're going to the world to come. Other people running not in a good direction. I think there's a little bit more, but I don't see it here. So let me read a little bit more. Thank you. Shekeshem, Sheazartanu, just like God, you let us finish Masechet Kiddushin, the Seder Nashim, this tractate in this order of Nashim. Let us learn a lot more, not just to learn, but to practice. And may the merit of everyone that's learned this Torah, this Gemara for thousands of years, stand with us. That we should never forget this Torah. And may it soon be fulfilled. When you walk, it will guide you. Torah will guide you. When you go to bed, it'll be with you. Can't forget this Torah. So important. Adonai owes lamo yitain. May God give strength to God's people. Adonai yivarechet amo v'shalom. But may God bless our people with peace.
Amen. Rabbi Goldberg, you want to give us the Kaddish?
Yes. Yikada v'yikada shemei Rabbah ve'alma dehu atid le'idchadata le'idchaya matya la'sakna yetahon l'chaya alma v'lemivne karta Jerusalem l'shchala hechala begavai l'ma'aker pulchana nuchra me'ara u'lavata pulchana deshmaya ve'ara v'yimloch Kedusha brichu b'malchutei v'karei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei l'chol beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv v'mramen yesh lama rabba mevarach le'olam omei omaya yibarach v'ishtabach v'yipar v'torman v'nasei v'tadar v'taleh v'talal shmei d'kudsha brichu le'ela mikol b'chata v'shirata t'ushchata v'nechmata damran v'alma v'mramen Al Yisrael v'arabanan v'al talmidehon v'al kol talmidei talmidehon v'al kol man de'oskim b'oraita Diva Toraden, Bediva Chol Atar V'Atar, Yehi Lahon Elchon Shlam Rabba Achina V'Chista, Barachamei V'Chayei Arichei, Muzona Revichei Ufukana Mikadav V'Honi V'Shmaya V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlam Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Imromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'Imru.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, Hadran Alach, Masechet Kiddushin. We will return to you, Masechet Kiddushin, but in the meantime, we are looking forward now to Tractate Bava Kama, which is coming up starting tomorrow morning. And I will just say 2 words about it, and then we will dive in, which is we are going to take a hard turn in our material. Bava Kama is one of 3 tractates, Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra. They're all really one very big tractate, and all of it deals with civil law. If I damage your property, what kind of restitution do I owe to you? So completely different area of Jewish law, and we will be there for over 400 days. So no need to rush it. We will get started tomorrow. In the meantime, wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. Very wonderful to be with you, to learn from you. Thank you to our panelists, to Rabbi Lopatin, Rabbanit Fruchter, Rabbi Goldberg. Thank you to all of you for teaching us, for learning with us. Thank you to all of you for your amazing comments and questions. And we are wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom. It is nearly Shabbat for some of you, a few more hours for others of you. And we will see you very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Mazel Tov. Great way to
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.